The hospital room was quiet that morning, except for the faint hum of machines and the soft chirping of birds outside the window. Sunlight streamed in through the thin white curtains, landing gently on the face of a man who had almost forgotten what sunlight felt like on his skin. His name was Arjun Mehta, 38 years old, once a mechanical engineer who spent his days fixing things until life broke him in ways he never imagined. 7 years. That's how long it had been since Arjun's legs stopped obeying him. 7 years since the accident on that rain-soaked highway changed everything. He used to believe pain was temporary, that healing was inevitable. But over time, pain had become his shadow, and hope had turned into something he only pretended to believe in for the sake of others. The nurse entered quietly, checking the IV line and smiling politely, the kind of smile that didn't ask questions. Arjun returned it faintly, out of habit. "Good morning, Mr. Mehta," she said. "Physiotherapy at 10. Dr. Rhea will see you then." Dr. Rhea. The name alone stirred something, a strange mix of trust and frustration. She had been his therapist for 2 years, and unlike the rest, she never gave up, even when Arjun did. She was younger than him, mid-30s, patient but relentless, always telling him, "One day, Arjun, your body will listen to your heart again." He wanted to believe her, but belief was heavy, and he was tired. That morning, as he stared out the window, a memory flashed, the night of the crash. Rain pelting the windshield, the sound of tires skidding, a blinding light, and then nothing. When he woke up, the doctor told him his spinal cord had suffered permanent damage. That word, permanent, had become his prison. For the first few years, Arjun's world shrank. Friends stopped visiting. His wife, Neha, stayed by his side for a while, until she couldn't anymore. He didn't blame her. Love, too, had limits when faced with endless uncertainty. She left quietly one morning, leaving behind a note that said, "I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore." He folded that note and kept it in his wallet, not out of resentment, but as a reminder of how fragile everything was. At 10 a.m., the sound of the wheelchair squeaking down the therapy hall echoed faintly. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, Rhea's way of making the space feel less clinical, more human. She greeted him with that same warmth, kneeling to his level. "Good morning, Arjun. How's the pain today?" He shrugged. "The same as yesterday and the day before." She smiled, not to dismiss his pain, but to soften it. "Then maybe today will surprise it." He rolled his eyes, but deep down, her words always left small ripples in the still water of his heart. The session began, stretching, guided breathing, pressure exercises. Every movement reminded him of what he'd lost, but Rhea kept him anchored with her voice. "Feel the weight in your toes, even if you can't move them. Imagine the signal traveling down." Sometimes he imagined too much. Sometimes, when her hand brushed against his leg, he swore he felt something, a faint, almost ghost-like sensation. But when he looked, the truth remained cruelly still. An hour passed. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Rhea handed him a towel and said gently, "You've been stronger lately. Your muscles are responding faster. I think we're close." He asked, "Close to what?" A trace of cynicism in his tone. She replied, "To a miracle you stopped believing in," softly. That night, Arjun didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, haunted by her words. Close to a miracle. What if she was wrong? What if hope was just another form of pain? He reached for his sketch pad, the only remnant of his old self, and began to draw. He drew himself standing in a field, sunlight on his face, arms stretched toward the sky. It felt childish, but for a brief moment he smiled. The next morning, a phone call came. It was his younger sister, Asha. She said, "Bye," her voice trembling. "Papa's condition isn't good. The doctors say it could be any time now." Something inside him broke open. His father had always been a proud man, strict but loving, the kind who taught him how to ride a bicycle by letting go too soon. "You'll never learn balance until you fall," he used to say. The irony was cruel now. Arjun wanted to go see him, wanted to say goodbye, but the thought of traveling, of facing his father in that state made his chest tighten. He said, "I can't," in a whisper. Asha's silence on the other end said more than words ever could. She said, "He still asks about you every day. He says he wants to see you walk again, even if it's just once." That night, Arjun wheeled himself to the therapy room. It was dark, empty. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. He parked his chair in front of the mirror and stared at his reflection. Tired eyes, unshaven face, body half alive. And then, in a whisper, he said to himself, "Just once." He gripped the parallel bars, his hands trembling. His upper body was strong now. Years of resistance training had made sure of that. Slowly, he pulled himself upward. His arms shook violently, pain searing through his back like electricity. His breath grew ragged, sweat dripped down his face. For a second, he stood, not fully, but enough to feel the weight of his body pressing against his legs. Then they gave out. He collapsed, gasping, tears stinging his eyes. But this time, the tears weren't just from pain. They were from something else, something that felt dangerously close to life. The next morning, Rhea found him sleeping on the therapy mat, arms still wrapped around the parallel bars. She didn't scold him. She just sat beside him quietly, tears in her own eyes. "You tried. That's where miracles begin," she whispered. Over the next few weeks, something shifted. Arjun started pushing harder, staying longer. Each session left him more exhausted, but also more alive. The hospital staff began to notice the quiet man in the wheelchair who now smiled occasionally, who joked about his failures, who looked out the window not with longing, but with intention. One afternoon, as he practiced with Rhea's guidance, she said, "There's a special therapy session next month, a clinical trial using neuromuscular stimulation. It might be your chance, Arjun, but it's risky." He looked up at her, eyes steady. "I've been living with risk since the day I survived that crash," he said. "Let's do it." The day of the clinical trial arrived like the first storm of monsoon. Thick with tension, unpredictable, alive. Arjun sat in his wheelchair outside the therapy lab, watching doctors move in and out with controlled urgency. Electrodes, sensors, machines that hummed with quiet promise. It all looked like something from a future he wasn't sure he belonged to. Dr. Rhea stood beside him, clipboard in hand, her expression caught between confidence and fear. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "There's pain involved, real pain, and no guarantees." Arjun exhaled slowly, staring at his motionless legs. "Pain's been my closest friend for 7 years. At least this time, it might mean something." She smiled, sad and proud all at once. "Then let's begin." They transferred him carefully onto the adjustable therapy bed. Electrodes were attached along his spine, thighs, and calves. The lead technician explained how the device would send electrical impulses, mimicking brain signals, trying to wake up the dormant pathways that once carried movement. Arjun nodded, barely listening. His thoughts had drifted to his father. He pictured the old man sitting on their ancestral home's veranda, wrapped in a woolen shawl, eyes tired but hopeful. "Just once," Asha had said. He wants to see you walk just once." The first jolt hit like lightning. Arjun's entire body convulsed. His hands clenched, his jaw locked tight. The pain was sharp, pure, almost cleansing. He wanted to scream, but instead a broken laugh escaped his lips. Dr. Rhea called out, "Are you okay?" He nodded, tears streaming. I'm alive," he gasped. "Keep going." The impulses continued, rhythmically, each one deeper than the last. For moments his legs twitched, tiny, involuntary flickers of life. The entire room froze, watching the monitor spike. Rhea's voice cracked. "We have muscle response." He didn't hear the applause or the murmurs of astonishment. He only heard the faint echo of his father's voice from years ago. "You'll never learn balance until you fall." He had fallen 1,000 times. Maybe this time he'd learn to rise. Hours later, when the session ended, Arjun lay motionless, drained but glowing from the inside. His body felt alien, yet somehow awake. Rhea placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did more today than science expected," she said softly. "Rest now. Tomorrow we continue." But sleep didn't come easy. That night he dreamed. He dreamed of running through fields, his younger self laughing beside him, the scent of wet soil and sunlight mixing in the air. When he woke, there were tears on his pillow and a strange warmth in his legs, tingling, faint, like the aftertaste of electricity. The following weeks were brutal. Every day brought pain that tested his limits. But pain was no longer his enemy. It was proof of life returning.
Rhea documented each milestone. Day 3, slight muscle contraction. Day 10, partial control of thigh flexors. Day 18, twitching toes visible. Day 26, assisted standing for 3 seconds. The hospital staff began whispering his name like a miracle, the man who might walk again. And yet, inside, Arjun battled fear. What if it all stopped tomorrow? What if hope betrayed him again? Each night he stared at Neha's note tucked in his wallet. He wondered what she would think if she saw him now. Would she regret leaving or smile knowing he found strength after she couldn't stay? One evening, Asha visited, her eyes wide with disbelief as she saw him during therapy, struggling, trembling, standing. "Bye," she whispered, tears spilling before she could finish. "Papa, he's still holding on. I told him you'd come." Arjun's throat tightened. "Tell him to wait a little longer," he said, voice cracking. "Tell him his son isn't done fighting yet." That night, Rhea approached him after everyone had left. She said, "There's something I need to tell you. The next phase, it's dangerous. The currents will be stronger. Your body might not handle it. We can stop here and still call it a victory." He looked at her, exhausted but unwavering. "No, I can't stop halfway. I promised someone I'd walk again. For him, for me." She nodded slowly. "Then we go all in." The final trial day arrived under an overcast sky, rain tapping the windows like nervous fingers. The therapy room felt sacred now. Dim lights, steady monitors, the faint hum of machines ready to rewrite history. Arjun gripped the parallel bars, electrodes humming against his spine. His breathing was steady, eyes closed. "Let's do this," he whispered. The current surged, stronger, deeper, sharper. His body jerked violently. Pain clawed at his nerves, but he didn't let go. He focused on one image, his father, waiting. "Come on, Arjun," Rhea urged, her voice breaking through the chaos. "You're almost there. Trust your body. Trust the memory of standing." He groaned, every muscle screaming, and then a flicker. His knees locked, his toes pressed against the floor. For the first time in 7 years, he felt gravity through his legs. Ria's hands hovered near him, ready to catch him. But Arjun didn't want help. Not yet. "I've got it," he gasped. Seconds turned into eternities. He stood, fully upright, trembling, but unbroken. The room fell silent. The hum of machines faded into the background. For a brief, sacred moment, the world stilled. Then he took a step. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't steady. But it was his. The first step after 7 years. Gasps filled the room. Ria covered her mouth, eyes overflowing. Arjun laughed through tears, voice trembling. "Tell them, tell my father, I'm coming home." Later that night, when everyone had gone, Arjun sat alone by the window, legs wrapped in bandages, but alive under the sheets. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and new. He whispered to the night, "I stood today, Papa. I stood." He didn't know that miles away, in a small house lit by a single lamp, his father took his final breath with a faint smile. Asha held his hand and whispered, "He walked, Papa, just like you wanted." When she called Arjun the next morning, her voice was calm, steady. She said, "He's at peace now." Arjun closed his eyes, tears falling freely. He whispered, "He waited. He waited for me to stand." The next few days blurred by, a mix of grief and triumph. Ria stayed close, silent when words weren't enough. When Arjun finally returned home, the world felt different. Every wall, every corner carried memories of the man he once was. He rolled into his old workshop, the one covered in dust and forgotten sketches. He touched the tools, the blueprints, the old photo of him and Neha smiling. He murmured, "I thought I lost everything, but maybe I just needed to learn to rebuild." He placed the photo on his desk beside a small wooden plaque that read, "Fall 7 times, stand up 8." For the first time in years, he believed it.
The days that followed were quieter, softer, but heavy with echoes. Every step Arjun took inside that therapy hall, no matter how wobbly, how uncertain, sounded like thunder in his soul. He was learning to walk again, yes, but more than that, he was learning to live again. Still, life after miracles isn't always a celebration. It's a slow awakening. At home, Arjun realized that the world didn't pause for him. Time had moved on. The city outside his apartment buzzed with the same impatience, the same chaos. He had missed weddings, birthdays, countless sunsets. And though he was standing now, the silence of the past 7 years often whispered louder than any noise outside. His sister Asha began visiting every weekend. She brought food, laughter, and updates about their father's funeral rites. But each time, her eyes would drift towards his legs, that mix of pride and worry only family can hold. One evening, as she helped him balance on his crutches, she said softly, "Papa used to say, the hardest steps are the ones you take after everyone stops watching." Arjun smiled faintly. "Then I guess my hardest steps start now." He returned to therapy daily. The hospital had become a second home, the scent of disinfectant, the squeak of rubber soles, the rhythm of his crutches tapping against the floor. Ria continued to guide him, though their sessions now carried a quieter energy. They didn't need words as much anymore, just presence. One afternoon, after a long session, Ria broke the silence. "You've come farther than anyone thought possible, Arjun. The medical board wants to document your recovery. They think it could inspire others with spinal injuries." He looked away, uncertain. "Inspire?" he said with a hollow laugh. "Ria, I'm still broken. I still wake up scared my legs won't move again." She met his gaze gently. "That's exactly why it'll inspire them." Her words lingered long after she left. That night, he sat at his old workbench, sketchpad open. His pencil moved slowly,
tracing the outline of 2 feet on a blank page. Underneath he wrote, "Proof of life." But something else tugged at him, a longing that hadn't faded. Neha. She hadn't reached out in years, but every corner of his home still carried her presence. The chipped coffee mug she loved, the faded scarf hanging by the door. He had forgiven her long ago, or at least he thought he had. But part of him still wanted her to see what he had become. The next morning, he found her number in his phone, untouched, unchanged. His thumb hovered over the call button for what felt like forever, and then, before he could think, he pressed it. The ringtone pulsed like a heartbeat. "Hello?" Her voice was the same, calm, warm, painfully familiar. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then softly, "Neha, it's me." Silence. A breath caught on the other end. "Neha?" she whispered. I didn't expect." "I know. I just wanted to say, I'm okay, better than before." Her voice trembled. "I heard about your accident again through Asha. I wanted to come see you, but I thought maybe you'd hate me." "I did," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "But hate doesn't heal anything. I think I understand now. You needed to leave to save yourself." She was crying now. "And you? Did you ever save yourself?" He looked down at his legs, the faint scars running across them like maps of survival. "I am still learning how." There was a pause, the kind that felt like forgiveness hiding between breaths. "Can I see you?" she finally asked. Arjun hesitated. He wanted to say yes, but fear crept in. Fear that seeing her would unearth all the pain he had buried. Still, he found himself saying softly, "Tomorrow, at the park near our old house." The next day, he arrived early. It was a crisp morning. Children playing, couples walking, the air alive with the scent of wet grass. Arjun stood by the lake, leaning on his crutches, watching his reflection ripple in the water. When Neha arrived, she froze at the sight of him. For a long moment, she just stood there, eyes wide, hand trembling against her chest. "You're standing," she whispered, tears welling up. He smiled faintly. Barely. But yes. She walked closer, hesitant at first, then faster, until she was right in front of him. "I didn't think I'd ever see this," she said. "Neither did I," he replied softly. "But I think maybe I needed to lose everything to understand how to rise." They sat on a nearby bench, talking about old memories, unfinished dreams. He told her about the therapy, about Ria, about the first step that felt like touching heaven. She listened quietly, eyes glistening. After a long silence, she said, "Arjun, I am married now," she said, softly, her voice breaking. "I have a son. He's 5. Arjun's heart clenched, not with jealousy, but with an ache that was strangely peaceful. "I am glad," he whispered. "You deserve that kind of happiness." She looked at him for a long moment, tears spilling freely now. "You are my home once, and I was your fire," he said quietly. "Both burned, both taught me to live." She nodded, took one step back, and whispered, "Goodbye, Arjun." When she left, he didn't cry. Instead, he closed his eyes and felt the earth beneath his feet. He was standing, alone, but steady. And for the first time, that was enough. That night, Ria found him back at the hospital gym practicing in silence. "You're pushing too hard again," she scolded lightly. He smiled. "Not hard enough." "Why?" she asked gently.
He looked at her, eyes soft but burning with quiet determination. "Because there are people out there who gave up like I once did. I want them to know that the story doesn't end in the wheelchair. It begins there." Ria's lips trembled with emotion. "Then maybe your journey isn't just about walking again," she said softly. "Maybe it's about helping others remember how to stand."
For a long moment they stood there, two souls bound by struggle and faith, as the hum of machines filled the silence between them. Outside, the city lights flickered like quiet stars. Somewhere in that glow, Arjun imagined his father watching, smiling. He whispered to the night, "I'll make it mean something, Papa. I promise." And for the first time, the promise didn't feel heavy. It felt like wings. Months passed, seasons changed, and somewhere between pain and persistence, Arjun became something more than a patient. He became a symbol. The hospital used his story in motivational workshops, and the local news covered his miraculous recovery. But Arjun never liked that word, miracle. It made it sound like something divine, something accidental. But he knew the truth. It was blood, will, and 1,000 silent nights of breaking before building again. He started volunteering at the rehab center, mentoring new patients who had just been told the words that once shattered him, "You may never walk again." One of them was a boy named Kabir, barely 18, paralyzed from the waist down after a motorcycle accident. The first day Arjun met him, the boy wouldn't speak. He just stared at the ceiling, eyes hollow. Arjun wheeled up beside him and said quietly, "You hate everyone right now, don't you?" Kabir didn't answer. "I did too," Arjun continued, "especially the ones who told me to stay strong. You don't want strength right now, you want truth. So here it is. This will hurt, every day. But one day you'll wake up and realize pain isn't the enemy. It's the reason you're still here." That made Kabir glance at him just for a moment. It was enough. Over the weeks, Arjun became his shadow, teaching him how to laugh at small victories, how to turn therapy into a challenge, how to dream again even when your body betrays you. Watching Kabir move his toes for the first time reminded Arjun of that sacred spark, that fragile miracle hiding inside persistence. And yet, despite the inspiration, Arjun's own battles weren't over. His left leg remained weak, his balance unpredictable. Every morning he faced a choice, to give in to the exhaustion or to rise anyway. Some days he fell, hard, but every fall had a purpose now. One evening, as the sky burned orange, he found Ria sitting on the hospital terrace, staring into the horizon. She looked distant, lost in thought. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the railing. She smiled faintly. "You ever think about what comes after a miracle?" He chuckled softly. "I guess you start learning how to live again." "Or how to let go," she whispered. He frowned. "What do you mean?" Ria hesitated before saying, "I got an offer from a neuro research institute in Germany. They want me to lead a new rehabilitation program. It's everything I've worked for." A long silence followed. The wind moved gently through the air, brushing against their faces. "When do you leave?" he asked finally. "In 2 months." He nodded slowly, looking down at his hands. "You should go." "I don't want to," she said quietly. "You're my reason for staying this long." He turned to her, eyes soft but steady. "Ria, you saved me because you didn't let my story end, but maybe it's time I learned to write the next chapter myself." She looked away, eyes glistening. "And if you fall again?" He smiled gently. "Then I'll get back up, the way you taught me." The air between them filled with unspoken emotion, a mix of gratitude, loss, and something like love, though neither dared name it. 2 months later, the day she left, Arjun stood outside the hospital holding a small bouquet of marigolds. "For luck," he said. Ria smiled through tears. "For you too, Arjun. You're proof that broken things can become blueprints for hope." When her taxi disappeared down the road, Arjun felt a quiet ache settle in his chest, not the old ache of despair, but a softer one, the kind that reminds you you've lived. He poured his focus into the rehab center. He and Kabir began filming short videos, snippets of therapy, stories of courage, moments that didn't make it to the news but deserved to. They called the series One Step at a Time. The first video went viral, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. No background music, no filters, just Arjun helping Kabir take his first assisted steps, their laughter echoing off the sterile hospital walls. Comments flooded in from around the world, people who had given up, people who were trying again, parents, soldiers, survivors. One message read, "I haven't walked in 12 years. Watching you reminded me that my story isn't over." Arjun sat back, staring at the message for a long time. Then quietly he whispered, "Neither is mine." Months turned into a year. Kabir eventually walked with crutches, then without them. On his last day at the center, he hugged Arjun tightly and said, "You didn't just help me walk, sir. You taught me how to fight again." When Kabir left, Arjun went back to the empty therapy hall, the same one where he had fallen countless times. He stood there, eyes closed, listening to the echoes of his own past, the pain, the triumph, the silence that once broke him. He placed his hand on the parallel bars, then slowly let go. He stood, no supports, no electrodes, and this time he didn't shake. Tears welled up uninvited, but welcome. He whispered to the empty room, "We did it, Papa. We really did." As if on cue, a soft breeze drifted through the open window, carrying with it the faint scent of marigolds, his father's favorite flower. Arjun smiled through tears. He believed, just for a second, that maybe heaven was listening. Weeks later, he received a letter in the mail. It was from Ria, written on plain white paper in neat handwriting. "Arjun, Germany is beautiful, but I miss the noise of our little therapy room. Every patient I meet reminds me of you, not because of your story, but because of your stubbornness to never let it end. You once said pain was your closest friend. I hope now peace is. Keep walking, Arjun, not for them, for you."
He folded the letter and tucked it inside his sketchbook, the same one that held his drawing from years ago. On that old sketch of 2 feet, he added a single line beneath, "and still walking." That evening, as the sun set, Arjun stepped out of his house and walked down the street, slowly, steadily, each step echoing like a heartbeat. Children ran past him, dogs barked, life moved on, and he smiled, not because he had conquered fate, but because he had finally made peace with it. He reached the end of the road, turned back, and whispered to the fading light, "This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of everyone else's." Somewhere far away, in a world of quiet skies and golden fields, his father's voice seemed to answer, proud, tender, eternal. "Balance, my son, is found not in standing still, but in rising every time you fall." 2 years later. The auditorium was filled with quiet anticipation. Rows of people, patients, doctors, families, sat waiting for the annual Courage in Motion conference to begin. It was an event that celebrated those who had defied their medical diagnoses, the ones who had rewritten the rules of survival. Backstage, Arjun adjusted the microphone clipped to his collar, his palms slightly sweaty. He had spoken publicly a few times before, but this was different. This was the same hospital that once had been his prison, and now it was inviting him back as a keynote speaker. As he looked at his reflection in the mirror, he smiled faintly. His hair had begun to gray at the edges, his face lined not by time, but by endurance. He stood tall, no wheelchair, no crutches, just balance earned through pain, patience, and perseverance. The event hostess's voice echoed from the stage. "Please welcome Mr. Arjun Mehta, a man who reminds us that miracles are not made in heaven, but in the human heart." The applause rose like a wave as he walked onto the stage, slow but steady. The sound was thunderous, not for fame, not for recognition, but for what he symbolized, the quiet strength of persistence. He reached the podium, looked out at the crowd, and began. I don't know how to start with words like miracle or inspiration. I'm not either. 7 years ago, I was lying in a hospital bed, staring at a ceiling I thought I'd never see from a standing position again. I remember the exact sentence the doctor told me. You may never walk again. It wasn't just my legs that went numb that day. It was everything. Dreams, faith, even the will to breathe. You know what nobody tells you? Losing your ability to walk is not just about your body. It's about losing the rhythm of your life, the sound of your footsteps, the feeling of moving forward. For a long time, I existed. I didn't live. I blamed the world, God, and even the people who tried to help me. Until one day, someone told me something I'll never forget. Maybe your body isn't broken. Maybe it's just waiting for your heart to believe again. That someone was my therapist, Dr. Rhea. She made me fight when I didn't want to. She made me stand when I only wanted to disappear. And one night, after years of falling, I finally took a step. One step. People call it a miracle, but it wasn't magic. It was thousands of invisible moments, crying at 3 a.m., screaming into pillows, wanting to give up, and then not doing it. That's what walking again really means. It's not legs that move. It's courage that remembers how to.
I lost people along the way, he continued. My wife couldn't stay. My father left before he could see me stand. But maybe that's how life teaches us, by breaking the things we thought were permanent, so we can learn what truly is. I used to believe strength meant never falling. Now I know it means getting up even when nobody is watching. And if you're sitting here today, in pain, in fear, in loss, I want to tell you something I wish someone told me earlier. You are not your wounds. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your wheelchair, your heartbreak, your broken past. You are the space between all of that, the part still fighting, still breathing, still hoping. He stepped away from the podium then, walking to the edge of the stage. The lights followed him, soft and golden. 7 years ago, I was told I'd never take another step. Today, I walked here to tell you, don't believe in miracles. Be one. The hall erupted in applause. Some stood, some cried, but everyone felt it. That indescribable weight that only truth carries. As Arjun walked off stage, he caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the front row. Rhea, smiling, tears glistening. She had flown in without telling him. Their eyes met across the distance. No words were needed. The look said everything. We did it. That night, after the event, Arjun drove to his father's resting place, a quiet cemetery by the hills. The city lights glowed faintly in the distance. He knelt, placing a single marigold on the grave. "Papa," he whispered, voice trembling, "I walk today, not just for me, but for everyone who still can't." The wind rustled softly, carrying the faint scent of earth and flowers. Somewhere in that silence, he felt peace settle in his chest, deep, warm, complete. He stood there for a long time, watching the stars emerge one by one. They seemed closer tonight, like witnesses. Then, from the top of the hill, he looked down at the city, the lights, the roads, the people moving, and for the first time in years, he felt perfectly at home in his own skin. Because home, he realized, isn't where you live. It's where you learn to rise.
Months later, the One Step at a Time Foundation was officially launched.
a nonprofit dedicated to spinal injury rehabilitation and emotional healing. Arjun and Kabir ran it together, reaching thousands across the world. Videos of patients' first steps filled their social media pages, each captioned with the same simple phrase: "The first step isn't forward, it's inward." Letters poured in daily, from veterans, mothers, accident survivors. Some wrote that they had started walking again. Others said they had simply started hoping again. And on days when doubt returned, when pain flared or loneliness crept in, Arjun would walk to his studio, open his sketchbook, and trace the old drawing, the feet he once drew when he couldn't move. Beneath it, he had written new words. He took his first steps after 7 years in a wheelchair, but his real journey began when he decided to never stop walking again. He smiled, closed the book, and looked out the window at the sunrise, gold spilling across the horizon like forgiveness. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was beautiful again, in its scars, its silence, its motion. And as the morning light touched his face, Arjun whispered to himself, "I made it, Papa. I finally made it." And in that whisper lived every fall, every tear, every rise, proof that sometimes the hardest roads lead you back to yourself.